The final warning. The Grand Council chamber of the Galactic Scientific Alliance was a place where reason reigned supreme, where logic, data, and diplomacy shaped the destiny of civilizations. Yet, on this particular day, reason felt like a distant relic of a forgotten past. The air crackled with unease. Representatives of 17 spacefaring species sat around a table so large it seemed to stretch into infinity. The focus of their gathering. Humans. They had issued another warning. The message had arrived barely an hour ago, simple yet ominous. A recorded transmission from the Terran High Command had been broadcast on all known diplomatic channels, a repetition of their previous words. "We ask, one last time, do not make us angry." A shudder passed through the assembly. Even the most war-hardened species, whose civilizations had waged wars for thousands of years, found themselves shifting uncomfortably. At the head of the chamber, Supreme Commander Valor, a towering reptilian from the Draconar Dominion, clenched his jaw. His deep green scales gleamed under the chamber lights as his long talons tapped against the armrest of his seat. His species had conquered entire star systems before some of these council members had even discovered fire. And yet, here he was, unsettled by the words of a race that had barely 2 centuries of interstellar travel under their belt. "They think they can intimidate us." His voice was a low growl, reverberating through the room. "This is the 3rd time they have issued this so-called warning. And what have we done? We've tolerated their arrogance. This council has wasted precious time analyzing their threats instead of acting. I say enough." A murmur of agreement rippled through the chamber, but not everyone shared his sentiment. Dr. Klar, a xenobiologist from the Vacan Empire, raised his hand. His iridescent skin shimmered as he rose to speak. Unlike the warlords and strategists in the room, his expertise was in the study of species' biological and psychological behaviors. "Supreme Commander, I implore you to reconsider." His voice was calm, but urgent. "Human history is riddled with conflict, but what concerns me is how they fight. They do not conquer the way your kind does, nor do they subjugate like the Kalshur. No, humans do something unique, something terrifying." The chamber quieted as Klar activated a holographic projection. Floating above the table, historical data began playing. It showed ancient human wars. Millions fighting in trenches, obliterating entire cities in nuclear fire, waging battles on scales unseen in any other species' history. It moved forward in time, showing their first interstellar war, where they had turned entire asteroid belts into kinetic bombardment weapons. "Humans," Klar continued, "do not simply fight to win. They fight until their enemies beg for the war to stop. When challenged, they become something beyond rational comprehension. They break every rule of warfare, not because they are barbaric, but because they believe survival is more important than honor. When they say, 'Do not make us angry,' it is not a threat. It is a plea." Silence. For the first time in history, the council was uncertain. The Threxian emissary, a being of pure energy housed within a crystalline shell, pulsed with an erratic glow. And yet they are weak compared to the combined might of this council. Their fleets are smaller, their technology inferior. Even their fastest ships lag behind our scouts. Klar nodded. "Yes, but they adapt, faster than any species we've encountered." He gestured again, and the holograms displayed another clip, this time of human engineering. Within months of encountering superior alien warships, they had reverse-engineered them, developed countermeasures, and found ways to turn weaknesses into advantages. "They do not just fight wars," Klar said, voice darkening. "They end them." A ripple of unease spread through the chamber, but Supreme Commander Valor sneered. "Enough of this cowardice. They are primitives, nothing more than upstart mammals. I say we call their bluff." Klar sighed. He had expected this. "Very well," he said. "Then let us hope that when humanity shows us what they truly are, we will not regret our arrogance." Elsewhere, aboard the Terran High Command vessel Retribution. Deep within human-controlled space, aboard the flagship of the Terran fleet, Admiral Jonathan Kessler sat in the war room, watching the same diplomatic transmission be replayed. The Galactic Council had laughed in humanity's face. "They don't believe us." His second-in-command, Commander Reyes, sighed. "They'd really think we're bluffing." Kessler exhaled slowly, staring at the screen. "Then they are going to learn," he said quietly. "The hard way." He turned to the Fleet Command I, a sentient intelligence known as HFY. "Mark all Galactic Council military outposts as potential hostiles. Prepare the contingency plan." The AI's voice was emotionless, but if it had a soul, it might have sounded concerned. "Acknowledged, Admiral." Preparing Phase 1. Kessler looked out at the endless stretch of space beyond the viewport. The Council believed humans were merely making threats, that they were just another species trying to posture and gain power. But they had made a mistake. They had given humanity time. Time to prepare. Time to strategize. Time to decide that this war would be their last. The universe was about to learn, too late, why humans had always said, "Please, do not make us angry." The day we crossed the line. A meeting of the unwise. The Grand Council chamber had been in session for over 6 hours. In that time, representatives of 17 interstellar civilizations had debated, dismissed, and even ridiculed the warnings issued by humanity. Some argued that the Terran Confederation was merely posturing. Others, like Supreme Commander Valor, believed that humanity's threats were nothing more than a desperate attempt to avoid the inevitable, a full-scale invasion. But one truth remained: no one truly understood what humanity was capable of. "We are wasting time." The massive form of Supreme Commander Valor loomed over the assembly. His deep emerald scales rippled with irritation, his reptilian eyes burning with contempt. "These humans think that by issuing empty threats, they can delay their destruction. I say we show them the folly of their arrogance. We strike now." His declaration was met with murmurs of agreement from the more warlike species in attendance. The Kalshur warlords pounded their fists on the table in approval, their insectoid mandibles clicking in anticipation. The Ur-10 battle clans, a race of cybernetically enhanced warriors, nodded in agreement. Even the Threxian emissary, who had previously been neutral, now seemed to lean toward action. But not all voices were in favor of war. Dr. Klar, the xenobiologist from the Vacan Empire, had spent his entire career studying the behaviors of alien species. He had delved into the psychology of war, analyzed the historical records of countless civilizations, and identified key patterns that dictated how each species fought. And yet, nothing he had encountered before resembled the madness of human warfare. Klar's voice was steady, but urgent. "Supreme Commander, before you declare war on humanity, I implore you to consider what we do not yet understand." He gestured to the holographic display, activating yet another sequence of data. "These creatures, humans, do not engage in war as we do. They do not fight to expand their territory, nor do they conquer for resources. Their history suggests that war, to them, is something else entirely." The display shifted, showing battles from humanity's past. Scenes from Earth's ancient history played out in vivid detail. Men fighting with swords and spears, trenches filled with bodies, entire cities reduced to dust in nuclear fire. And then the footage shifted to something more disturbing. Wars of desperation. Battles where humans refused to surrender, even when faced with certain annihilation. Wars where entire populations chose death over enslavement. Wars where humans, when pushed to their limits, did the unthinkable. They destroyed everything, including themselves, just to deny their enemies victory. Klar turned to the assembly. "We assume that they think as we do, that they will fight only if they believe they can win. But what if that assumption is wrong? What if their goal is not to win, but to ensure that no one wins?" Silence filled the chamber. Then, Supreme Commander Valor let out a deep, rumbling laugh. "Enough of this nonsense. They have no fleets to rival ours. Their planets are scattered. Their technology is centuries behind us. Do you truly expect us to believe that these primitive creatures could pose a threat to the combined might of the Galactic Council? Klar clenched his fists. He could see it. The pride, the arrogance, the refusal to accept an outcome that did not place them in control. He had seen this same arrogance before in countless civilizations, and yet he had never been so afraid. Because this time they were underestimating the wrong species, and they would not realize their mistake until it was too late. The Council's fatal decision. The vote was cast. Of the 17 civilizations present, 15 voted in favor of military action. Only 2 abstained. None voted against it. The decision was final. Humanity would be brought to its knees. Within minutes, a transmission was sent to the Terran High Command. The message was simple. Your threats have been noted. They are meaningless. Surrender immediately or face the consequences. No reply came. Not immediately. But across the stars, on the outer fringes of human-controlled space, something stirred. The silence before the storm. Aboard the Terran High Command vessel Retribution, Admiral Jonathan Kessler sat in his command chair, staring at the message from the Galactic Council. He had anticipated this. He had known, from the moment humanity issued its final warning, that the Council would not listen. And so it begins, he muttered. Commander Reyes, standing at his side, folded her arms. No attempt at negotiation. No offers for peace. Just threats. Kessler nodded. They never intended to negotiate. They believe we are too weak to fight back. They believe we are bluffing. Reyes sighed, rubbing her temple. Are we? Kessler didn't answer immediately. Instead, he turned to the Fleet Command AI, Aegis 1. Initiate Protocol Ragnarok. The AI's synthetic voice remained emotionless. Acknowledged. Activating Contingency Plan Omega. All fleet commanders, prepare for total war. Reyes's eyes widened. Sir, if we do this, there's no going back. Kessler's gaze darkened. There was never a way back, Commander. Not after what they just did. The countdown began. And across the void, in the deepest reaches of human space, long-dormant war machines began to wake. The Galactic Council had crossed the line. Now, humanity would show them why they had begged not to be made angry. The silence that echoed across the stars. For 3 days, after the Galactic Council's ultimatum, the void of space remained eerily quiet. The Terran Confederation did not respond. No desperate pleas for peace. No counteroffers. No begging. For the Council, this was expected. In their eyes, humans were prideful, but weak. Their silence was nothing more than an inevitable resignation to defeat. And so, the Supreme Commander of the Galactic Armada, Valor, ordered the first strike. Across the cold expanse of space, war fleets of 17 species mobilized, their ships blotting out the stars as they encroached upon the outer edges of human-controlled space. The first target was the Terran colony of Gliese IV, a thriving planet home to over 6 million humans. Their plan was simple: overwhelm, conquer, subjugate. And they expected zero resistance. But humanity had already anticipated this move, and unlike the Council, they had been preparing for far longer than 3 days. The first contact with a prepared species. Admiral Takar of the Threxian Dominion stood on the bridge of his warship, the Sovereign Wrath, staring at the tranquil blue world of Gliese IV through the reinforced viewports. There was no planetary defense grid, no battle-ready fleet in orbit, nothing to suggest that humanity had even prepared to resist. Takar turned to his second-in-command, a towering Urtan cyborg with half of his body encased in metallic armor. Commander Savak, begin orbital bombardment. We will cleanse the resistance before landing. Savak gave a nod, pressing his clawed hand against a holographic console. A moment later, 100 capital ships adjusted their weapons, targeting the surface below. The skies of Gliese IV darkened as flaming projectiles fell toward the planet, but something was wrong. Before a single plasma bolt or railgun slug reached the surface, a pulse rippled across the atmosphere. For a brief moment, space itself seemed to distort, as if reality was bending around an invisible force. Then, every single bomb, missile, and energy projectile halted midair. And without warning, they changed direction. The entire bombardment reversed course, arcing back toward the attacking fleet. Admiral Takar barely had time to process what was happening before alarms screamed throughout the ship. "Incoming projectiles," one of his officers roared. The very weapons they had fired were now slamming into their own ships, tearing through shields and hull plating like paper. Explosions blossomed across the void. Within moments, 40 warships were reduced to debris and wreckage. Panic rippled through the armada. Takar's hands shook as he stared at the planet below. What in the name of the void was that? Then, the transmission came. A single human voice, calm, collected, and unwavering, echoed through every communication system of the invading fleet. "We warned you. You did not listen." Takar's blood ran cold. The humans were not silent out of fear. They had been waiting. The war machine awakens. The destruction of 40 ships in the opening seconds of the battle sent shockwaves across the Galactic Council. For the first time in centuries, the so-called invincible coalition of interstellar civilizations had suffered a humiliating defeat. Supreme Commander Valor was enraged. Slamming his clawed fist against the massive war table in the council chambers, he bellowed at the assembled leaders. How did they do this? The scientists scrambled to analyze the battle data. It wasn't a planetary defense system. It wasn't an advanced energy shield. It was something else, something beyond anything the Council had encountered before. But before they could determine the cause, humanity answered. The return message. On every major galactic communication channel, a single broadcast overrode all frequencies. It was a human transmission. A man stood at the center of the screen, wearing the dark blue uniform of the Terran High Command. His expression was impassive, but his eyes held a sharp intensity that sent a chill down the spines of every council leader watching. He introduced himself with a simple nod. "I am Admiral Jonathan Kessler of the Terran Confederation." He did not scream. He did not threaten. He simply spoke. 3 days ago, you issued us an ultimatum. Surrender or face destruction. You assumed our silence was fear. It was not. It was preparation. You came to our world expecting compliance. You came expecting weakness. And in doing so, you have made a fatal miscalculation. You have now given humanity a reason to fight. You wanted war. You have it. You will not win. Asterisk asterisk. And then, the signal cut. The beginning of the end. Within 12 hours of the transmission, humanity's true forces revealed themselves. Massive black armored warships emerged from hidden bases across the galaxy, ships that no intelligence report had ever recorded. Where the Galactic Council had assumed humanity was spread thin, they had been wrong. Humanity had not been building colonies. They had been preparing a war machine. The Battle of Gliese IV was just the first crack in the Galactic Council's armor. And soon, the cracks would become a fracture. Humanity's counterattack had begun, and the universe was about to learn why humans never wanted war.